January 2013. Been around this community for a lifetime, fifth generation Hillsborough County resident. So I appreciate being here today. Bill, I can remember so many years ago going to Hugo's, barely having enough seats for everyone, and here we are again today with barely enough seats. So first of all, I want to let you know that I'm here to announce my retirement. At least until, I never say never, after trim next year I might come back. So we'll see what happens. I'm just kidding. It's going to come pretty good. Boy, tough crowd this morning. How are you?
I think we're all shocked.
You're starting murder on the Orient Express after trip notices next year. I'm starting murder on the 15th floor. So I don't know if I really want to be there. Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see everybody here today. So many friendly faces. I know my wife called a bunch of people to get people here to support me. How important it me. I'm not sure. I think she's streaming. She had the oral surgery yesterday, so she didn't show up. So it was nice. She was quiet for a day, so it was good. I'm in big trouble. Couldn't text her. I was just kidding. I've got to go home after this. So, good to see you. Bill, thank you so much for the invite last week. It was sort of on short notice. But I look forward to the opportunity to speak with you a little bit today. These are difficult times, sir.
She texted, I heard that.
Oh, is that? Oh boy, here we go. So now I'm completely thrown off. It's important for me to be here today for a lot of reasons, and as a property appraiser, we try to fly under the radar as much as possible and be non-controversial. At least I try to do that. But then we know that these are very interesting and different, turbulent, and historic times. And so it was actually opportune, Bill, that you called me, because one of the things that we're going to try to do over the next year is to be even more visible and try to get as much information out to the public as we can going forward. And so this is a great opportunity. I do have a number of folks from my staff here. Muriel introduced herself. So if there's anyone who wants to stick around these particular questions or things that they should have some kind of exemption, stay with us. We'll see what we can do. We didn't bring you 10% off coupons with us, but that's okay. Todd's here, so he represents you. So I do want to say this, and this is important to me. Whenever we have an opportunity that we're together, Todd Jones is in the back. Todd ran against me, not last time, but the time before. And we've become interesting, fast friends since then. I think we kind of bonded over Star Trek. We're kind of dweebs like that. He texted me last night and said, "Do you want me to be there?" I said, "Sure." He's always one asking tough questions. And then I said, "I was just about to watch Star Trek Discovery," and it's just kind of a strange thing. But I think that it speaks to what I try to do in my public life that's missing so much now. Is that I promised when we ran against each other, certainly we duked it out in the political arena which I think kind of fixed them about politics after we went through it. But then we met afterwards and became friends. I valued the reasons that he ran. I value the fact that he did run, because all of us should be asked to, not that I'm asking for an opponent next time, but that we should all be willing and able to put ourselves out there again to explain why we should be given the people's trust again for another 2 or 4 years, depending. And so I'm glad that he's here, and he certainly is a subject matter expert when it comes to valuation and the market and things like that. So what does the property appraiser's office do? We're literally, and it's important that people know this, and this is part of the education campaign that we're sort of going to be on. What do we do? Literally, the property appraiser does exactly what the name denotes, which is we appraise or value all of the property in Hillsborough County. There are about 520,000 properties in Hillsborough County each and every year. And we also evaluate folks that, or exemption applications or exemptions that people may apply for to their ad valorem taxes. And that's literally what we do. We don't set tax rates. We don't raise or lower taxes, at least directly. We're part of that paella that ends up being your tax bill, I suppose. But that literally is what we do. And how do we do that? Well, it's based on January 1st. So your value of your property as of January 1st of the given year, when you receive your trim notice in August, how many of you received the trim notice from me last year? A number of folks. The folks that are watching the stream, you don't have to raise your hand. But How many of you actually read it? Okay, we're on the honor system here, so it is Lent, so make sure you're not lying. But the reality is most people don't read it. Why? Because it says what on it? This is not a bill, right? Right, that's Greek for I don't need to read this, right? There's too much stuff here. I will tell you, if there was ever a year to read your trip notice, it's this year. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's the case. The trip notice comes out in August, but it's based on January 1st of that previous year, the previous January 1st. So we literally are historians to an extent. So as you know, the market over the last couple of years, but in particular last year and then this year, it's a remarkable market, something we've never seen. I used to ruminate, when I first came into office, I was blessed when I came in 2013 and we were just coming out of the Great Recession, right? And I used to think, goodness gracious, what must have been like to be the property appraiser when we fell off the cliff? Because it's very difficult, if not impossible, but you know, January 1st of a given year, things are going okay, and then you fall off the cliff in March. Well, the trip notices you send out are based on values as of January 1st. So it's very difficult to catch up when the market tanks. You know, little did I know that I would be in the position to have to try to send out trip notices based on a market that is supercharged. Even though it may or may not, during the course of a year, you know, come back to normal to some extent. It really hasn't. So we literally are looking at, we've all seen it, right? We've seen the highest rental rates in the country, hottest market in the country, Champa Bay. I blame Tom Brady, who, by the way, he's back, just a beautiful man. I will tell you that you've seen articles, 41% increase in residential values. You know, number one, if not amongst the highest in the country. When you back out cost of sale and things like that, we literally are looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% increase overall property value countywide. Now, who does that affect? Well, if you're homesteaded, your taxable value is capped at 3% increase in taxable value each and every year, or inflation, whichever is less. Now we know that this year, for the first time in a long time, inflation is going to be higher than 3%. But still, you can look at your taxable value going up 3% this year. That may, you know, you'll feel it, but not, you know, the 3% is something that's manageable. Well, guess what? We have a lot of home buyers, a lot of new construction, folks that have moved in here from other places. So now these folks come next November, when tax bills come out, they can see, who knows, 20, 25, 30% increase in their taxable value. That's going to be a real increase in terms of their taxes. Because remember, if you buy in a given year, let's say if I sold my home today, this is interesting, so I kind of thought this through. And I'm actually mad at myself because I raised my own taxes. The value of our home that we bought back in 2017 has probably doubled since then, which is a good thing. Many of you probably were in the same boat. We could sell, that'd be a great thing. So it's a good thing in a way, you're building all that equity. Okay, so I sell today, where do we go? Can I buy the same home for that amount that we sold it for? Probably not. If you're in a position you're an empty nester, some folks like that, or that you're flipping houses and you can go live, you know, pay an exorbitant rent someplace for a while so the market corrects, there's some of that, okay? But this past year, certainly we had a 3% increase in our value. Is it my time up? You know, thank you. I started salivating like a Pavlov here, so I need another sandwich. I'm just getting distracted here. So literally, our taxes went up a little bit this year because of the fact that we had nearly 3%. We'll have it again this year in taxable value. But on top of that, guess what? Your homeowner's insurance almost doubled. Your homeowner's insurance last year. And while the legislature was doing all the things they did this year, it didn't have a whole lot to do with us. They didn't deal with the property insurance issue. They talked about it a little bit and came home to run for re-election. But you know, that ours almost doubled, and we know the other inflationary pressures that are out there. But can you imagine if you're a new home buyer, you here from someplace else, you were fleeing New York or California, all the places that people came for during the pandemic. And this, in the first year that you bought a home, you were paying based on the previous homeowner, who probably kept if they had homestead property. And now all of a sudden this year, it was going to reset, and you're going to start paying based on the actual fair market value, just value. Well, you could go up 25, 30% plus an insurance increase, plus. That's why I'm here, and that's why it's going to be an interesting August when trim notices go out. So, and that's why it's important. A trim notice literature, as you notice, the proposed taxes. Everything that kind of goes into what ultimately ends up being your tax bill is on there. But it's important again to notice that we have to track the market. It's not something that we can fudge. The DOR looks over our shoulder. And so now we have to try to figure out, as we're looking at it, and it's not just, it's across the board. Industrial's on fire. Todd will tell you this. You know, commercial, office that we thought was going to be so negatively affected through the pandemic in Hillsborough County is just the opposite. And you see the sales that are going on in various hotels, everything that the hospitality sector's come back. So all of this we're trying to figure out in terms of how do we, first of all, we have to qualify sales, but the problem is that this is such a different market. How do you even figure that out? You've got tons of built up demand, tons of capital out there, lots of investors. People are paying ridiculous amounts for, really historic amounts for what they're buying. So the values clearly are rising in the market, and we can't just ignore it. So that's what we're trying to wrestle with this year. So don't be so mad when you get your trim notice from me. So what ultimately can we do? Who's most affected? Again, new home buyers, folks that moved here from someplace else and bought, new construction. And then there's all the spin-offs of that. What if you're a renter? We've seen why rental rates have gone up so much. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, but most notably is the fact that we have somebody just personally in our office, young lady works in our office, came out of the elevator the other day. I was coming back in the office after lunch, and she had tears in her eyes, and I said, what's the matter? She said, I've got to move. I said, well, why? And she said, well, my landlord just raised my rent $500, and I just can't afford it. And I said, your landlord? And she said, well, it's actually somebody that bought the house from my previous landlord, gave a deal he couldn't refuse, and so he raised it $500. My previous landlord, we had a relationship, he probably would have done that, but I've got to, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's not out of the ordinary, right? We're seeing it everywhere. And we're seeing it in areas in East Tampa, we're seeing it all over the place where people are raising rents, and frankly, the landlords can demand those rents. In some cases, they're not doing it just to be mean, but if they bought it for a certain amount, they've got to make it work. You've got people in certain sectors that are buying things and they're not even interested. A lot of times in terms of the income approach, when we look at income producing properties, generally try to figure out the values based on what people expect to make, their return on the investment. Well, there's so much capital out there, people are just trying to find places to put their money. So they're not even interested in the first year necessarily. And so it's going to be a trick this year. So what can we do? Well, first off, get involved. On the back of your trim notice every year, there's a place that shows where the hearings are because ultimately the tax rates, the millage, the folks that, the taxing authorities, city council, county commission, school board, all of the various different authorities that have the ability to levy taxes through the millage. They have hearings, and I would encourage you because it's really interesting. People just don't show up to those things. They don't really get involved. They don't look to see. And I'm not going to put those folks on the spot necessarily, but they've got to take a good, long, hard look this year on what they're going to do with those rates because they're really they're Obi-Wan Kenobi. They're the only hope in terms of really kind of being able to do anything in the short term. But the cost of doing business is going up for those folks as well. But get involved and see, and let's see what they can do in terms of, again, it's limited in terms of how much they can cut a millage rate. Certainly they shouldn't be thinking about raising it in a year like this, with the amount of revenue that they should be garnering this year. Take a good look at your trim notice, make sure we're right. Hold us accountable. Tie goes to the taxpayer in my office. So, whether it be an administrative review, when we get closer to June and the numbers are getting pretty close to where they're going to be, or after you receive your trim notice, we'll try to work with you, make sure that our pencils are sharpened just as much as they can be. If need be, file a value adjustment board claim. This may be I believe I'm asking this, but if need be, file a value adjustment board petition, and we'll work with you. If it goes all the way through the process, that's fine. But ultimately, that's the way to kind of formally question the value that you did and we may have given you. And again, this is an opinion of value. We're going to do the best we can, but we make numbers. And so we're going to try to do whatever we can. If we're wrong, we're going to fix those things. We're not going to, it's not us versus the public. In fact, that's one of the things when I came into office, oftentimes we got meetings about different value adjustment board petitions that we had. And I would hear people in the office say, oh, we won at that, or we lost it. I don't think we should even have that kind of discussion. We make the numbers, we do the best we can, we defend them. If they're wrong, we fix them. If they're right, we'll defend them. But it shouldn't be an us versus them with the public whatsoever. So I'd say get involved, read your trim notice, work with us as best we can, and we'll get through this. But understand that we're going to track the market. The market is red hot, and there's not a lot that I can do. I can't just fudge the numbers and pretend that the market's not what it is. So that's why it's so good that I'm here today, and look forward to answering some questions. I appreciate you for being here.